The sky burned like it was ashamed of the ground it illuminated. Shattered towers jutted upward like broken teeth from a city that had once dared to hope, now reduced to slag and smoke. Lieutenant Mason Hale's boots crunched over glass and debris as he moved through the ruins, his pulse steady despite the shrill hum of alien engines still circling overhead like vultures waiting for a final breath. His suit's HUD pinged with life signs, 3, maybe 4 survivors flickering weakly through concrete and dust. He tapped a silent command to his squad, signaling them to fan out and sweep. Firelight danced off his visor, distorting his reflection into something more machine than man. He didn't mind. He was used to being seen that way, especially by the enemy. No one ever expected humans to survive the way they did. Outnumbered, outgunned, always arriving late to the war but somehow still dragging victory behind them by the throat. The galactic community had called it luck at first, then madness. But what terrified them most was the suspicion it might be something else entirely. He stepped over a charred beam and ducked into what used to be a community center. The interior was choked with smoke and silence. His breath echoed back at him in his helmet until a soft sound cut through. Barely audible. A whimper. He froze. Not human. Mason lowered his rifle just a fraction and followed the sound, scanning corners and shadows. Another faint cry, higher now, insistent. His HUD struggled to parse the source, flickering confused data. The sound led him to a cracked door barely hanging from its hinges. He nudged it open with his boot. Inside, among the rubble, sat a tiny creature. Pale blue, barely 2 feet tall, with skin that shimmered like soft velvet. Large, ink-black eyes glistened with tears. Its hands, 3 fingers each, clutched a broken piece of metal like a shield. It trembled as it stared up at him. Mason slowly knelt, setting his rifle down but keeping it within reach. His hand hovered between them, open and unthreatening. The creature didn't move. "You're not supposed to be here," Mason said quietly, though it couldn't understand him. Its lip trembled, then it squeaked. An anxious chirp that sounded almost like a plea. It didn't run. That alone unsettled him more than the bloodiest battlefield. Behind him, footsteps approached. "LT," came Reyes's voice, sharp and wary. "We're getting evac orders. Command says we pull out, no civilians." Mason didn't turn. "This isn't a civilian. What is it, then?" "I don't know. Just a kid." He heard the pause. Knew what Reyes was thinking. "It's enemy," Reyes said at last. "You sure it's not bait?" Mason didn't answer right away. He looked at the tiny alien. Dirt streaked its soft skin. One leg twisted unnaturally. It hadn't attacked. It hadn't even flinched when he knelt. It just watched him, eyes too large, too honest. He reached forward, slowly. The child recoiled, then froze. Gently, Mason brushed away the debris around it. Its leg was fractured. Badly. "I'm not leaving it here. LT, you bring that thing back and Command'll have your ass gift-wrapped. Then I'll bring my ass too." Reyes swore under his breath but didn't argue. Mason had earned his share of crazy. And survival. Command usually looked the other way when you brought results. Mason carefully lifted the child, cradling it in his arms. It hissed in pain but didn't struggle. Its fingers curled into the fabric of his uniform as if it already knew that humans, despite everything, sometimes meant safety. They airlifted out under cover of night. The city fell behind them, consumed by fire and shadow. In the transport, no one spoke. The squad kept their eyes on the far wall, pretending not to notice the alien child huddled against Mason's chest. When they landed back at the outpost, Command was waiting. Colonel Young stood with arms crossed, eyes like stone beneath his gray beret. "Tell me that's not what it looks like." Mason stepped off the ramp, boots heavy. "It's injured. Alone. Barely older than a toddler. It was left behind. I don't care if it sings lullabies and bakes cookies. That thing's a hostile. You brought an enemy into our perimeter. With a broken leg and no weapons? You think it couldn't have a transmitter, a parasite, a suicide gland? Hell, some of these things explode when they die. I scanned it. Nothing." Young's jaw tightened. "You think we have time to play petting zoo in the middle of a war? Mason met his eyes. If all we are is what they expect, monsters, killers, then we've already lost. Silence. A crackling radio somewhere. Then Young muttered, "You take full responsibility." "I do. You clean it. Feed it. Name it for all I care. But if it so much as sneezes wrong, I'll personally vaporize it." Mason gave a nod and walked past him. The child clung tighter to his chest. They set up a space in the medical wing, separate, guarded. Mason brought the child food, water, warmth. It didn't eat for 2 days, just stared at him with those black orbs. But on the 3rd day it took a bite. Then another. They didn't speak the same language, but trust wasn't words. It was action. He brought comfort. The child gave him silence, then presence, then eventually laughter. A strange, chirping sound that caught him off guard. The squad watched from afar, whispering. Some found it unsettling. Others, fascinating. One night, Reyes sat beside him and said, "That thing follows you around like a puppy." "Yeah, I think I'm the first thing it ever saw that didn't try to kill it." Hell of a way to build peace. Someone has to. But peace wasn't in the cards. Not yet. 3 nights later, the sirens wailed. Another strike. Unexpected. Brutal. Mason grabbed his gear and turned toward the blast, only to hear a familiar whimper behind him. "No," he muttered. The child stood in the hallway, terrified, pointing toward the southern gate. Then it chirped. A sharp, urgent sound, and pointed again. "Reyes!" Mason shouted. "It knows where they're coming from." No one had time to question. They followed. The squad turned south, bypassing the defense grid. They found the infiltrators moments before they breached the wall. They were ready. This time they were ready. When the dust settled, and the bodies were cleared, Young called Mason into his office. "You used intel from a pet. I used intel from someone we saved. Someone who saved us back." The colonel stared long. Then he said nothing, just nodded once and returned to his reports. Later, as night fell, Mason sat beside the child, now bandaged, fed, and sleeping peacefully. He watched its small chest rise and fall. Fragile, innocent. The sky beyond the dome still smoldered. He didn't know how long this war would last. Didn't know how many more battles he'd crawl through. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel like just a weapon. He felt like something more. The galaxy thought humans were unkillable. They hadn't yet realized they were also impossible to hate. And for someone like Mason, that was the most dangerous truth of all. The outpost felt different after the attack. Not quieter. There was still the hum of drones, the crunch of boots, the distant rumble of artillery drills, but the tension had shifted. Where there had once been suspicion, now there was curiosity. Uneasy curiosity, yes, but it was a start. The child, now affectionately called Kiru by Mason's squad, moved on crutches with a kind of clumsy determination. Its fracture was healing faster than expected. Alien physiology still largely unknown. What fascinated the medics even more was how quickly it picked up on human expressions. Smiles, frowns, laughter. It mirrored them with uncanny accuracy, not mockingly, but as if it wanted to belong. Mason watched it every day, torn between admiration and a gnawing dread. He hadn't forgotten the stakes. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. It was a gamble. One misplaced trust and the entire base could be ash. But every time he looked into those obsidian eyes, he couldn't bring himself to believe the worst. Command wasn't so forgiving. A week after the strike, a dropship arrived unannounced. Black, unmarked, humming with authority. From it stepped a woman in a crisp gray uniform. No name tag, no unit insignia. She was flanked by 2 soldiers in dark combat suits and eyes like frostbite. Mason met her on the tarmac, arms crossed. "Lieutenant Hale," she said, voice clipped. "I'm here on behalf of the Intelligence Division. Didn't know we invited spooks." "Fascinating," she murmured. "It imprinted on you. It's not a duck." She turned. "Has it demonstrated cognitive development?" "It mimics language, gestures, even emotional cues. Picks up faster than any AI we've run sim tests on." "Useful," Mason stepped between them. What happens now? We bring it in. Proper facility. Proper containment. It's not a specimen. She smiled, a cold, bureaucratic smile. That's not your call. Mason's fists clenched. You take it from me, it won't cooperate. It trusts us. Not a cell. Her expression didn't waver. That's irrelevant. Before he could answer, a soft chirp drew their attention. Kiru looked up, eyes focused on the woman's communicator. Then it hissed. The device sparked. Short-circuited. The woman jumped back, furious. What did it just do? Mason knelt. Kiru. Easy. It's okay. But the child wouldn't stop staring at the device, trembling. It recognized something, Mason muttered. That sound. Something in that frequency spooked it. The woman regained composure. It tampered with military tech. That's reason enough to classify it as a threat. No, Mason said. It didn't attack. It reacted. Something on that device triggered it. The woman stepped forward again. Calmer but more dangerous now. You have 48 hours. Then I'm taking it. She left with her guards. The base returned to its rhythm. But Mason's blood didn't cool. Something wasn't right. Kiru wasn't violent. If it had reacted with fear, it meant something more than circuitry. It meant memory. That night, Mason sat with Kiru in the observation room. He placed a copy of the communicator on the table. Kiru refused to look at it. What is it, buddy? Mason asked softly. What do you know? Kiru turned, raised one tiny hand, and slowly tapped 3 fingers against the glass in a pattern. Tap, 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 tap. Mason blinked. That's not random, is it? He played the pattern back. The child nodded once. Then it drew something on the fogged window, a symbol. A crude triangle within a circle. Mason froze. He'd seen that symbol before, classified reports, encrypted logs. It wasn't alien. It was human. Blackout division. Experimental warfare. Dark projects they buried in shadow. Where did you see this? He whispered. Kiru just looked at him. The truth clicked into place like a punch to the gut. The attack on the city, it wasn't random. The enemy had known exactly where to strike, what defenses to bypass. And Kiru, a child, left behind not by accident, but on purpose. A message, or worse, a Trojan. But why warn him now? Kiru touched his hand. Its eyes shimmered, not with deception, but fear. It didn't want to be what it had been made to be. The next morning, Mason gathered his squad. Reyes, Vaughn, Casper. All loyal. All had bled beside him. He told them everything. They didn't flinch. What do you want to do? Reyes asked. We figure out what this is. Before they take it from us. They broke into the intelligence quarters that night. Reyes spoofed the logs. Vaughn looped the cameras. Mason found the woman's communicator and cracked it. Encrypted files spilled onto the portable display. Most were gibberish, ghost logs, obfuscated strings, but one video stood out. It was from a recon ship. Human. Docking inside an alien dreadnought. Inside, the footage showed labs. Cages. Hundreds of young ones like Kiru. Most lifeless. Some still breathing. Human scientists. Observing. They weren't prisoners. They were test subjects. Mason's stomach turned. Reyes swore under his breath. They're using them, Vaughn muttered. Weapons programs? No, Mason said. They're trying to make them into something else. A final video showed Kiru, barely conscious, being implanted with a neural receiver. The same frequency as the communicator. Not to control, to monitor, and maybe detonate. Mason stepped back, breath shallow. They didn't leave it behind, he said. They delivered it to us as a target. He didn't wait. He ran. The medbay was dark. Too dark. He found the guard outside unconscious. A needle puncture at his neck. Inside, Kiru was gone. He grabbed the comms. Reyes locked down the base. Now, Kiru's missing. And the spooks behind it. Alarms screamed. Boots thundered. But the dropship was already powering up. Mason made it to the hangar as it began to rise. Kiru was inside, strapped down, eyes wide in panic. The woman stood beside it, calmly tapping her communicator. "You're too late." Mason raised his rifle. "Step away from it. You have no idea what you're protecting." "I know enough." She tilted her head. "Would you still protect it if it kills you?" "It already saved me once. You just see a weapon." "I see a kid." She sneered. "Then you're not a soldier anymore. Maybe that's a good thing." Before she could respond, Kiru began to chirp. Rapid. Urgent. The ship's systems flickered. Lights died. Gravity cut out. And then, silence. The dropship collapsed to the floor, lifeless. Smoke hissed from its panels. Sparks spat from the controls. Kiru lay still. Mason ran to it, pulled off the straps. His chest rose. Then another breath. Weak, but steady. "You overloaded the comlink," Mason whispered. "You shut it down." The woman groaned nearby, trapped beneath the wreckage. He left her there. Back at the medbay, they stabilized Kiru. Command demanded answers. Mason gave them only one. "He's not a weapon. He's a survivor." That night, for the first time, Kiru spoke a word in English. "Mason." The room fell silent. The war was far from over. But something had changed. Trust, once planted, had taken root in the ashes. And Kiru, born of conflict, was slowly becoming something no one had expected. Human. Rain fell on Outpost Terra, 7 for the first time in months, hissing against the metal rooftops like whispers in the dark. The air was thick with ozone and tension. Repairs were ongoing. The dropship's wreckage had been moved, its secrets buried, but not forgotten. Command had issued their statement. Containment breach, rogue intelligence agent, assets secured. The usual sanitized truth. Mason didn't care for their version. He sat at the far edge of the compound, on a steel bench facing the storm, Kiru beside him wrapped in a thermal poncho, sipping something warm from a cup too big for its hands. Its eyes had grown more expressive, its gestures more fluid. It no longer mimicked humanity. It embodied it. "How's the leg?" Mason asked. Kiru bent it, flexed the ankle, gave a little nod. "Better." It still spoke slowly, carefully, as if testing each syllable for weight. But every word was deliberate. "You did good back there. You saved lives." Kiru didn't answer at first. Then, was scared. "That's normal. Everyone's scared sometimes. Even me." "You are strong," Kiru said. "Like stone." Mason smiled faintly. "Stone cracks. That's why we lean on each other." Kiru tilted its head. "Together." "Yeah, together." Their peace was short-lived. A warning klaxon blared, rising through the rain. Red strobes lit the outpost walls. Mason was on his feet in an instant, hand on his sidearm. Kiru stood too, tense. Reyes's voice crackled over comms. "Unidentified fleet just dropped out of warp. No transponder. No comms. We're being scanned." "How many?" Mason asked. "Too many." Within minutes, the skies darkened. Not with clouds, but with ships. Sleek, silver-black vessels unlike anything in human records. Organic designs. No visible engines. They hovered, silent, as if judging from above. Mason raced to command center. Screens lit up with telemetry, threat analysis, and conflicting data. No weapons powered. No shields raised. Yet the sheer presence of the fleet was a message. They weren't here to negotiate, and they weren't leaving. Kiru followed him in, stepping cautiously past stunned soldiers. The instant the alien ships appeared, it had grown quiet, withdrawn. Mason knelt. "You know them?" Kiru nodded slowly. "My people." "Then why now?" Kiru hesitated, then pointed at the command console. "They found signal." "The device the agent used?" Another nod. "It was beacon. They think I'm dead. Or captured." Kiru looked down. "If they come, they burn. Everyone." Mason stood, heart pounding. "Then we need to talk to them before that happens." The general on site, an aging warhawk named Brask, wasn't inclined to listen. "Absolutely not," he barked. "No open channel. We prep defenses, we hold the line. You'll get us all killed." Mason snapped. This isn't an invasion. It's a rescue op, Brask sneered. That thing out there is why they're here. You want to talk? Fine. Do it in a sealed room with snipers ready. We're not doing this your way. The old man's eyes narrowed. That sounds like insubordination. It's survival, Mason shot back. You cage the kid again. You won't have time to regret it before those ships turn us into molten glass. Brask stared him down, then reluctantly relented. One chance. One signal. You screw this up, we go weapons hot. In the comms bay, Kiru stood before the main transmission node. It tapped a few keys, adjusting frequency manually. The small fingers trembled. Mason stood behind it, hand on its shoulder. You sure? Kiru nodded. The signal went out, not as words, but a harmonic pulse. Musical, strange, like whale song and static merged into one. For a moment, nothing. Then one ship descended. It didn't land. It hovered inches above the ground. A hatch opened. From it emerged a tall figure, humanoid in shape, draped in flowing biosynthetic armor that pulsed with light. No weapon visible, but its presence was immense. Kiru stepped forward, alone. Mason tensed, watching from the tower. He wanted to rush down, to stand between them, but he didn't. This was Kiru's moment. The alien knelt, not in threat, but reverence. Kiru said something in their language, a soft series of chimes and tones. The tall figure answered, voice vibrating through the ground like a cello string. Then slowly it reached up and removed its mask. His face was ancient, not old in age, but in expression. It had known war, loss, pain, but its eyes, like Kiru's, were wide and dark. The figure embraced Kiru. Seconds later, more beings emerged. None carried weapons. Some wept. One sang. Mason descended, slowly, hands raised. The tall one turned toward him, spoke again. Kiru translated. He says, I was lost. You brought me back. You protected. He wants peace. Kiru nodded. He sees not enemy, sees heart. The general, watching from the perimeter, looked ready to explode, but he held back, silent. Mason stepped forward. We don't want war. Never did. The alien leader extended a hand, not in threat, but in ritual. Mason took it. It was warm. That night, the outpost didn't sleep. Soldiers and aliens mingled cautiously. Gifts were exchanged, simple things. Music, food, symbols. Proof that civilization wasn't just about power, but culture. Later, alone, Mason stood again at the storm wall. Kiru approached. They are leaving, it said softly. I figured. They want me back. Mason's throat tightened. You should go. It's your people. Kiru hesitated, then shook its head. But you are my people too. The choice was cruel, to be divided between blood and bond. But Kiru had made its own truth. I want both. Mason smiled. Then we figure that out. Together. The alien ship departed without war. The skies cleared. Earth had met its reckoning, and survived, not through firepower but kindness. Mason never returned to standard command. Instead, he was assigned a new directive liaison, they called it. Ambassador. Peacekeeper. Kiru stayed by his side, no longer a ward, but a partner. Together, they traveled to distant stars. And everywhere they went, they proved the same impossible thing. Humans weren't just indestructible. They were worth believing in.